welcome to the Croydon Business Webinar. This is our third week of running these webinars, and we're very grateful to you for joining us this morning. Today we're going to be talking about a very important subject that I know is very close to many people's hearts, and that's we're going to be talking all about your business premises in the current situation, how you are dealing with that, what are the issues you're facing, whether that be around safety or about how you are managing the rents at this in time. We have a great panel with us again this morning, some experts that are hopefully going to answer your questions. I'm going to introduce them to you now. Firstly, somebody who has been in Croydon for a long time, Alex Gale from SHW. SHW are based in Croydon, and Alex is the head of the South M25 business space team. And he specialises in sales, letting and acquisition of industrial office and mixed-use properties. And I'm sure we'll be hearing from him that he's been on the front end of hearing what his clients' issues are at the moment. Vanessa Clark, Vanessa, no stranger to Croydon. Vanessa is a consultant surveyor with offices in the West End, but her speciality subject has and always will be, I'm sure, Croydon. And she manages and looks after many of the buildings here in Croydon and can give us her perspective. Joining us also, we have Neil Sinclair. Now, Neil is the National Cyber Lead for the Police Digital Security Centre. He's going to be talking to us about how businesses at a time when they're in lockdown, when they can't use their premises, need to be aware of the cyber issues around keeping their businesses safe. And then John Richards, who is from JAR Site Solutions. John's business is based in Croydon, but it's operating nationally. And John is responsible for the security of businesses in this current time, something that I know we're all going to want to ask some questions about. I'm delighted that we have a late arrival to our panel. I'd like to welcome Guy Willits, who's a partner at Trowers and Hamlin. Trowers and Hamlin are an international law firm, and Guy's role is looking after litigation in the property team. And I know the last few weeks have kept Guy very busy dealing with some of the legal issues around this subject. So welcome to you all. Thank you all for giving up your time. I'm going to hand over now to my co-host, Joe Gum, who's going to start the seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. We are taking questions today from all our panellists and from all our attendees. Now, I can see all our attendees are online at the moment. Can I ask that if you would like to participate and ask specific questions, please use our question and answer facility. You can either type your questions in and I will ask them to the panel for you, or you can give me a virtual wave and I will be able to let you actually join and ask your question directly from our variety of panellists. What I'm going to do first of all is just to go around each of our panellists and ask them what the impact of COVID-19 and the lockdown has had on their business, how they're managing, and what's the biggest set of questions that they've had from clients. I'm going to start with John on the grounds that he's very conveniently in my top left-hand corner.
Hi, thanks very much. So from our point of view as a security company, we've obviously been having to deploy staff everywhere at the moment, supermarkets, looking after businesses that are vacating their properties due to COVID-19. So we've been talking to a lot of businesses at the moment with regards to how to vacate their properties safely, how to keep them safe whilst they're out, with regards to checking their insurance policies to start off with, because they need to check whether there are any clauses in there that might affect their insurance with regards to there not being anybody in within certain times. And we're also advising everybody to make sure, obviously, that the properties are kept securely. So the doors, windows locked, checking fire escapes, checking all their fire equipment as well. And if they're not employing people like us or other companies like us to secure their properties for them, or they don't have alarms and CCTV in place, then to make sure they've got one of their senior management or somebody visiting the property at least once a week, just to check the inside and check the outside, just to make sure it's secure.
Thanks very much, John. Alex, can you let us know what the challenges have been for you and for the clients who you've been talking to?
Yeah, certainly. I think the key thing from our side of things, especially our management department, they have of a similar ilk in terms of the security side of things, but clearly the biggest thing has been payments of rent for our management department. And I'd just like to just sort of reiterate that it's the best thing to do is obviously to start to talk to people like us and our management department, rather than just not pay rent or look at deferring things. The key point is communication. From my side of things, I've been really busy trying to help out with the NHS. We've had some urgent requirements for additional storage space for NHS goods. We've also helped out a local pharmaceutical company, Day Lewis, in terms of extra storage space. And also had a few inquiries with regards to retailers, and I think this is going to be a bit of a thing moving forward, whereby I think the retail side of things will move more online as we've all been forced to do more online shopping. I think this could impact the retail side of our business in a big way moving forward. And then in terms of offices, I think the office side of things, and I'm sure Vanessa might add to this, I think people will probably look at different ways of working, and the idea of agile working will come to the fore for a lot of companies moving forward.
Thanks. Can I move on to Ness? I know you've been doing some guidance for people about how to approach the challenges in at least the commercial sector.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, I think there are some really important points to make on this. Both landlords and tenants are suffering equally. So landlords have been hit with their March quarter day and a thundering loss in terms of rental income going through. So that's the one hand. And many of these landlords are either pension funds or insurance companies. And they've got certain criteria beyond which they can't stretch. For tenants, it's equally hard. And I'm spending a lot of time talking to tenants and advising them. And the most important thing, Alex has already mentioned, is communication. The worst thing a tenant can do is stop paying rent, stop meeting their obligations, because one, the landlord's never going to find favour with that, and two, you're already off to a bad start. The most important thing is to communicate, confirm where the issues are, and then look at the alternatives, which I'm really happy to run through, and I'm sure Guy will also be running through some of those options. And personally, as an SME, it's tough. Business is not buoyant out there, and this follows a year, particularly for Croydon, where take up and activity was very, very low. So, companies have hardly drawn breath on recovery from that point to be plunged into this crisis, let alone sector crisis in retail, the oil industry, and everything else. So these are really fragile times at the moment, but there is good advice out there, and the important thing is to talk to someone as soon as you can and read the lease.
Okay, Guy, would you like to follow on? Because it seems to me that you're facing some of these slightly more at the coalface at the moment.
Yes, I am. And the very first thing I was told all those years ago when I started work was read the lease. So thank you for that. That's hits the nail on the head. I've worked through a couple of recessions in my time, and what I've seen here is that usually it takes a few months, if not a year or so, to switch from the kind of issues that you get in relatively normal times to recessionary type issues. And we've basically seen that change in a fortnight. Cash is now king, which is basically what happens in a recession. So I've been asked by quite a lot of tenants or clients who are on the tenant side, what we can do to preserve the cash situation, maybe taking the lead from the section in the Coronavirus Act about forfeiture of leases, or prohibiting forfeiture of leases for non-payment of rent. Quite often misunderstanding what that means and does. But I've been asked by tenants how to basically get away with improving our cash flow. And I've also been advising landlords on how to stop them doing that. So what you can do, because as I said, landlords too have obligations. Quite almost always that money is earmarked either for a pension fund or for interest on the borrowings that bought the property in the first place. You have banking covenants that you have to comply with. It's going to play havoc with your valuations of properties, particularly in the retail sector. And we've already seen a couple of pension funds or offshore funds struggle badly with loan to value ratios because of this just over the last week. So those basically of what I've spent the last fortnight doing, and it's getting more and more that. So basically, I'm now in recession advice mode.
It seems to me I've already had a comment in from one of our attendees saying actually the advice that you've all just given, which is talk to the landlord, is helpful. He says he's already spoken to his landlord and agreed a payment plan. Moving on to Neil, we are obviously all moving into a new home working world, and I appreciate we're on Zoom today. I'm guessing that you have been kept quite busy in the sense of being able to advise companies how to stay safe while they are using a whole load of systems and processes they hadn't had to rely on previously.
Yes, it's been very interesting for us because our unique selling point up until the lockdown was the fact that we used to go out and talk to people. And I say used to, hopefully we will again. So we've had to move our business model to an online model. Which is interestingly enough, we've actually managed to reach more businesses because of that. But yes, the questions coming in, particularly around the conferencing, because very quickly people have realised that it's important as much as anything that you stay in touch with your own team. So are using things like Teams and Zoom and various other platforms to do that. But of course, what's also happened in the last 3 weeks or so is the increase of rumour, particularly around the use of the internet. And as you mentioned, Zoom itself was in the news very much last week, and of course the one that all our children we use for families' house party. The slight sad thing about that is that if we had prepared beforehand for using the internet better, then we wouldn't be so worried, because it's the same things we would tell people in any case about making sure password protocols are strong, making sure that your team is aware of the password protocols, things like that. But now we're using home equipment as well. There's the added complication. Our children are coming on the equipment. We've got work stuff on there. And because there hasn't necessarily been the training previously, people are getting confused and putting themselves into slight problems about it, or giving themselves difficulties. They're mostly very easy solutions. I think it's just at the moment, businesses, as we've already heard, are very concerned about just keeping their heads above water for the most part. And as so often happens, the security bit slides down the list of importance. But I'm sure people have seen that cybercrime has increased some 400% since lockdown happened, while most other crime does seem to have dropped off. So it shouldn't really be allowed to slip down that chart. It's something that everybody should be thinking about, and reminding staff and indeed ourselves that we're doing the right thing.
Thank you very much. It's clear we need to be approaching security both from an external viewpoint from John and from an online virtual viewpoint with the advice that you've been given. Just while I wait for our attendees to start bringing in with their questions, we're going to launch hopefully a small poll that asks what the biggest challenge, the biggest concern people have in terms of leaving their offices vacant. And I'm going to look to Alex and Vanessa to see if they can help me answer a question that I've been thinking about, which is there's going to be a significant change, I believe, in the way in which we all work once we come out of this. What impact do you think that's going to have on the market? Nesta, would you like to start?
Shall I kick off? I think the first point to make there is that WFM, the new term, is working from home. It comes with mixed blessings. I don't think the office market will change completely. There'll be some adjustment so that there'll be more video conferencing, people stopping travelling so much, making more of the hours in the day. But in terms of more of the workforce working from home, if you're a small family, there are distractions, even with adult children, and the home isn't always set up to cope with that. And the other point is you need to feed off colleagues. Business works from contact, from discussing issues, discussing problems, and actually being face to face with people. So I think there will be adjustment in the office market. It will impact on specification, more flexibility, more connectivity, greater sort of data input and health and well-being. But in terms of the office and office market continuing, it will continue, definitely. And Croydon's in a great position for this.
Thank you. Alex, looking at you, I think particularly the impact has been quite heavy on retail. So I was wondering if you'd started to see any shift there in the way people were sort of looking towards the future, because clearly people aren't going to be taking up retail units at the moment.
No, and I think this just what we're doing at the moment is shopping online more, and at the start, I think there'll be a bigger push to people moving from retail to possibly to industrial. So there's more online trading, and people possibly realise that they don't actually need to shop front to work and set up their business, and a small storage space or an online presence is probably the way to go, which gives them more chance to have more flexibility in their sort of work-life balance as well, and possibly reduce their overheads, which is quite a big thing. And again, like Vanessa said, Croydon's in a good place to benefit from that. We are seen as an excellent last-mile logistics location because of the chimney pots and the areas which we serve. There are a lot of companies in Croydon and the surrounding area which also serve central London, the West End. So I think Croydon's in a good place, certainly for industrial. I think what will possibly happen is that we will see a little bit of a dip first. I think industrial in particular will come out probably first. Retail, I think, will probably have to be reimagined some of the space moving forward, and I think there will probably be sort of two ends of retail, the sort of main Croydon centres and the local areas supporting small villages and towns outside the main locations, and then the bit in between, I think that could be the area which we will see probably struggle the most.
Thanks very much. Catherine, I'm going to transfer over to you because I think you've been at the Croydon Task Force earlier today, and I wondered if the council had any views on what it could do in order to help retail with what I might describe as a change in the way in which the market operates.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. So I think the first thing to say is that Croydon Council, like all councils across the country, are doing an amazing job trying to repurpose lots of staff to meet the immediate needs. And the message really from the Business Task Force this morning was very much that they are there to support businesses, and the best way that they can do that, and that you can get access to their help and advice and access to the various schemes that are out there, is to do that via email. Clearly getting through on a phone line anywhere at the moment is problematical and very long-winded, but they have a direct email address which is economicdevelopment@croydon.gov.uk. Now that is being fully manned around the clock with a number of people able to take your inquiries. So anything business related on any of these subjects, please use that email. And they are, as I say, have a lot of dedicated people, whatever the question is, that will then put you in the right direction. So that's one routine. The other thing that's come up this morning is that they are looking at some flexibility in the planning department around change of use. So if as a business you are currently predicated in terms of what you can and can't do in your premises, then there is some flexibility. I don't know whether Guy, you're seeing this anywhere else, or Ness or Alex, but this could be helpful, I'm guessing, for restaurants that maybe don't currently have a takeaway provision or other retail elements. I don't know whether, Guy, you can add anything to that.
Yes, we have a couple of pension funds who own shopping centres up and down the country, and one of the conversations we've been having with them is about the user covenants in leases and their need with retailers to be flexible on the use covenants, so that they're allowing their retailers to repurpose their premises away from straightforward selling to more the experience of shopping type of thing. So that will include allowing, I mean, there is a planning aspect to this as well, but allowing them to put in tea shops and this kind of thing into their premises. The one break on that for individual tenants, it might be frustrating for individual tenants who want to widen their offering, is that particularly with shopping centres, the landlord quite often is trying to create a balance between the number of pure retailers selling things and the hospitality side of the centre. And if it allows too many of the larger retailers to get into the hospitality, then they are being a bit unfair to the pure hospital, to the cafes and the shops and so forth. You know, if you've got a small independent coffee shop in your centre, you've got a Waterstones who want to then set up a Costa in there as well. I've done already, but that kind of thing, you might be undermining the independent coffee shop down the Mall. So it's a tricky one, but the underlying message is all about communication, because if that kind of message, you can't be flexible on use covenants, not because we want to, not because as a landlord we want to screw up the rents because of it, but because we don't want to have an empty unit further down the corridor of what used to be a coffee shop because you've taken all that business. That's something that could easily be misinterpreted to cause a fair amount of hostility between the parties, whereas in fact there's a good fundamental reason for it. So it's communication on that.
I think that's important, because actually maintaining that business mix is important to having any kind of successful high street from the future. I've actually got a question in, really probably mostly for Guy, but if anyone else would like to come in on it, can they give me a wave? Which is someone that said it's a landlord who said he's had a request from a dentist who's had to close his practice to stop paying rent altogether. Will he be able to get government funding to meet his rent, or do I have to do the decent thing and take the hit?
There is no government funding for it. The rent is still due as of presumably the 25th of March, a week or so ago. So it is still technically due. It's very difficult to do many things to get it paid if the tenant isn't voluntarily paying it. But the embargo on, for example, not forfeiting the lease, which is a hell of a sword of Damocles in this case, comes to an end on the 30th of June. It might be extended, it might not. There are other methods that you can enforce payment if you want to have that conversation with the dentist. So it's a commercial discussion that you need to have about whether you actually do agree to let that tenant not pay, or whether you prefer a rent repayment schedule so that this particular payment due for the period the premises are in lockdown is just deferred, not completely written off. Whether you agree a reduction for this period, that is purely a matter for a commercial negotiation to be had. But the fundamental point is that the rent is actually still due and payable, unless there is some formal agreement that lets the tenant off the hook saying it's not.
Thanks very much, guys. Anyone else like to come in on that? I was also wondering, looking at Alex and Vanessa, is there any other help that people can get, not necessarily for rent, but in terms of rates relief? We all have heard about the schemes that are available for the retail, hospitality, leisure and nurseries, but a lot of other people have empty offices right now. Is there anything specific that they can do about that? Alex, would you like to go first on that this time?
Yeah, just going on to the what you just touched on, actually, in terms of retail, hospitality and leisure, just be clear that there's 100% rates relief for the year April 2021, so that's well worth thinking about. And if your rateable value is between £15,000 and £51,000, there's a grant of £25,000 available. And if there's your rateable value is less than £15,000, there's also a grant available of £10,000. So again, well worth considering, tie you over hopefully what will be not that much more of a lockdown. And there's also worth just going backwards actually in the year 2019-20, potential for a third of your rates for retail and hospitality. In terms of empty offices or empty industrial units and the likes of, I think it probably, there is potential, and certainly my rating colleagues are currently looking at trying to obtain some empty rates relief for offices which have been shut during lockdown, similarly with warehousing as well. So that is well worth considering. I'm not an expert in the rates field, but we have experts here, so if anyone wants to have a chat with someone, I can put them in touch with the relevant person. But I think something like that is well worth looking into further. And it's also worth just saying there's small business, if you're on small business rates relief for any type of property, then it is also possible to get a £10,000 grant as well. So there are a few things out there, and I think sort of Guy touched on things in terms of rent. Certainly some of our landlord clients, they are moving from quarterly payments to monthly payments to help the cash flow side of things. There are various landlords who are also looking at extending the leases. So if you can't pay for the next quarter, another quarter is put on to the end of the lease. So it really is about talking to your landlord and seeing whether you can get some sort of agreement to help you over the short-term period.
Thanks very much. Ness?
Shall I jump in there just for a minute? I think it's important to look at the balance of this situation, particularly where you've got tenants saying, we can't meet the rent, we can't meet our obligations. With the landlord giving them rental holidays or deferring rent, there's a payback at some point, and it's really important that tenants and landlords alike consider this carefully, because at some point in time, a landlord will want to balance that agreement back in their direction. So any tenant taking on variances to the lease to get some relief, short-term relief. In the long term, there'll be a balance. Tenants can be quite creative if their advice is good. If your lease has a break in it, look at moving that break out. Negotiate with the landlord for some immediate rent-free to compensate for that. And that can all of a sudden trigger in without the landlord being seen to lose so much. They're actually gaining from a longer term of income, but the tenant is gaining from immediately gaining from a rent-free holiday. There are creative ways of looking at this to make it more palatable for both sides.
Thanks. I've got a bit of a follow-up question, which is, there's been an awful lot in the press, and most of the questions today have been about rent, but a number of people, like ourselves included, also have service charge. And I have not been aware of whether there is any support that can be offered regarding that, because that forms as much as a cost to most businesses as the actual rent.
That's a really tricky one, Joe. Do you want me to, just to give a quick take? Service charge is an obligation which enables a landlord to run a building. So as soon as there's a service charge void, the landlord picks up that void. They've still got to run the building. And I think it's a harder area to negotiate on, but tenants should be very aware of their service charge arrangements, look at what is being provided in terms of services, and look carefully at the service charge agreements and budgets. And again, communication with managing agents in that instance is really important.
Anyone else like to comment on that point? Okay, moving on. I actually have a question that I think is specifically for John here, which is that there's been a lot of questions coming in advance of this, mainly from retailers, which is boarding up shop fronts advisable, and is it their responsibility? And if shop fronts get boarded up, would it simply encourage antisocial behaviour, as the whole area will have a feeling of a dead, locked down zone to it?
From my point of view, I think if retailers feel that they need to board up their shop fronts, then I would advise yes, because it's all part of securing their properties. And if they're not in there working day to day still, then they need to secure their properties. And for insurance purposes as well, they need to be able to show that that property was secured as best as possible. Now we're talking with the local police or police all across the country as well, whilst this situation is going on, and they are doing their best to patrol areas to keep an eye on all these vacant properties, as well as we are. We've been in discussion with Croydon Bid as well about the possibility of mobile patrols on the high street, to keep an eye on all the retail outlets, shops and restaurants and the like that are around there that are having to close. So I think the best thing for shop owners and restaurateurs to do is to secure their properties as best they can. Unfortunately, it is, most of the time it is down to them to deal with it, unless they are renting the space and they have a landlord, then that would be the landlord's responsibility, as far as I'm aware. I'm sure one of the other panellists may be able to advise on that. But it is a matter of just making sure windows are locked, doors are locked, and that regular visits are being made to the property to make sure that it is okay. I'm not here to make a sales pitch or anything like that. There's plenty of companies out there that will help. If companies have already got CCTV or alarm systems in place, then it can be monitored by that way as well.
Thanks very much. I've just got a very helpful note in for any businesses that might be considering discretionary rate relief. I understand that Croydon Council does have a discretionary rate relief scheme, and anyone interested in that should email economicdevelopment@croydon.gov.uk, and they'll get signposted towards help. I have a sort of question that's come in specifically for Neil, which is to say, Neil, what are the top 3 tips that all businesses should consider immediately to improve their basic cybersecurity?
Right. Well, the top 3 I mentioned one right at the start is the strong password policy. This is the really key one, particularly as people are now using home devices. So we're talking about strong password across all the business usage, and a strong password we now say is a 3-word phrase. So, for instance, look around the room that you're in, pick out 3 random things, put them together as a password. It sounds difficult because it's long, and obviously we want to write things down. Try not to do that. Password managers are available, and you will have seen when you use things like Chrome and Safari that it offers to save your password for you. So use those rather than writing them down somewhere. Obviously, burglary at home is not a big problem at the moment because we're all there, but it's something to consider going down the line. So a good password policy. 2-factor authentication is the other one that we should turn on wherever we can, to make sure that, as well as just putting the passwords into our systems, we're getting that SMS message coming to our phones, or using a Google Authenticator or some other method of authenticating passwords on your system. So please use that. A virtual private network as well is something that you should look at setting up. There are ones that are out there available for free. Quad9 is one, which is one that's used by government. You can download it onto your systems. This will stop your home system from being identified and protect your network. You can add things to make your whole network secure if there is several of you wanting to communicate from time to time. As already been said, we're not here as resellers, but one of the very good ones is called Perimeter 81, and it's free for small businesses, and it will just lock down and secure your own business network so you can communicate with one another very easily. And the final one that I would give in this little bit is to make sure that everything is updated. Software updates, put them on to come on automatically when you're asleep at night, so that they don't interfere with your working day business. But included in that, your home router. Everybody's now working from home. One of the big issues that we have is because everybody wants high download speeds so they can watch things like Netflix and play games and all that sort of stuff online. The home broadband is very fast, but to do that, it means it's a very broad pipe, basically. It comes down. And because more and more people are using it, they're making it broader and broader, which means that more bad stuff is also getting down it as well. So it's really important that you secure your home router. So if you've never changed the basic password that it came with, now is the time to do it. There will be instructions either from your provider or on the bottom of the router itself as to how to access the admin. Change that password, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's secure. One of the things that the cyber criminal is looking at doing is chasing down the places where people are now going to do their work, and they're targeting the websites that we use or that your business uses, and then attacking you back from there. So if you can make everything secure around the perimeters of your business and make the devices that we're using as secure as possible, then it's going to help you a great deal and save that added problem.
Thanks very much, Neil. Good advice. Catherine, you want to come in at this point?
I wondered whether Neil could give a shout out to your website, which I think is policedsc.com. I'm actually looking at it at the moment. I didn't know it existed before we met each other, but there's clearly a wealth of information on there for businesses, and particularly the SME market. I can see that there is a lot of help and guidance, and presumably, do you offer some sort of free consultancy advice?
Everything that we do is for free. That's the beauty of us, and we base all our advice is exactly as would be given by the National Cybersecurity Centre, and obviously we liaise with the Met Police and other police forces as well. So yes, please come and have a look at our website. If you have particular questions, then just email us at tellmemore at policedsc.com, and we'll be very happy to help you through any small problems that you have and point you in the direction of people who can help you, who've all been vetted by us. As I say, we're not a reseller, so we're not looking to do anything like that, but we will give you best advice, and we're very happy to do that.
That's great. Thank you. Joe, I wanted to invite somebody in who's actually one of our attendees. I'm going to put her on the spot, although I have just private messaged her. We've got Sarah Cusack listening in, who is looking after AMP House serviced offices. And I was just interested to ask her, on the ground, dealing with the small businesses that are in that space, what are you seeing in terms of businesses maybe having to close, or what is the take of that from an AMP House perspective? So Sarah, I think you can talk to us live.
You can, but you may need to unmute yourself.
So we'll give that a go. The other person that I know is listening is Saffron from Sussex Innovation, which is based at number 1 Croydon. Again, another serviced office space, looking after many, many small businesses. Saffron, I don't know whether you've got a take that you could give us as well. Sarah.
Hi, morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes, can.
Okay, lovely. Well, yeah, it's been really challenging at the moment because not only are we working with some businesses who are having to give us notice because they just cannot survive, they can't continue. We're also been contacted by, I think, around about 10% of our current tenants who obviously want to try and negotiate some sort of rent holiday or discount. And as I think sorry, I can't remember his name, Nick or Alex, as somebody was saying, unfortunately at the moment, whilst the buildings are in theory still open, the rent is still due. So for us, it's been really challenging to sort of protect the landlord and protect the tenant and give the tenant as much support and advice and signposting as we possibly can. But it's really, really tricky time for everybody.
Are you aware of your businesses accessing some of the support that's available through the various government schemes?
Yes, we are. And in fact, the council have been really sort of proactive in sort of, they have the list of all our tenants and the amount of square footage that they occupy within the offices. And those companies who are eligible in some form of rate relief, they have already contacted them directly. So what I attended the previous meeting that you were at with Croydon Council, the Business Network event this morning. And I think what was really interesting there was for me to just invite those other companies who may not know where to go, who may not know if they're eligible for something else, if it wasn't, what the council contacted the other tenants about. So it's about really supporting everybody because, at the end of the day, at some point, hopefully we will all go back to normal. And, it's really sort of reassuring to hear that people will still need offices because, you know, we still need to run a business, we still need to give somewhere for people to work. But equally, we just need to really try and support everybody, but also bear in mind that the economic damage that's going to be caused to all sides, it's not just not paying rent, but it's also protecting the landlord as well. So, you know, it's really tricky.
And I think Saffron, thank you, Sarah. I think Saffron, you're with us too.
Yes, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, just relaying the same message that Sarah was saying. We try to support our members as much as possible. We didn't take any rent for April, and we're looking at how we can try and support them for moving forward. Unfortunately, our landlord hasn't been as generous, and we've received messages just to let us know that service charges will continue as they have been, and rent will continue. And then they've sent out government support to help for us to find out how we should be able to pay our rent. Yeah, trying to look after both sides is a difficult position to be in. But like Sarah said, being in that meeting this morning and knowing that the council realises the benefit of our support and how we will be there to support businesses when this is all over is reassuring, and hopefully there'll be something that can come from that.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jo.
Oh, thanks. We had one very quick question back into Neil, supplementary from earlier. So very quickly, the question was, are you saying everybody should change their passwords now and or regularly and or every 6 months? I have a feeling you were saying all of those.
Okay. If you've got good safety protocols already, don't touch them, leave them alone. If you haven't, then set them up right now. You can't do it quickly enough, but make sure that they are strong enough that you don't have to change them regularly. The flaw with changing them monthly, which will take us back historically, makes people lazy. It's the old thing of when we were given passwords by our employers, we'd set them up as password 1, and when we had to change them, we'd make them password 2, password 3. Who knew? Well, unfortunately, everybody did. So, strong password, as I previously said, the 3 words, 4 words, random words, whatever, as complicated as possible. And then you can keep them. It will take 9 nonillion years to crack a 24-figure 4-word random password. 9 nonillion years. Password 1 take about 25 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to hope that we aren't going to be locked down for 9 million years.
Well, let's hope so, because I don't even know what a nonillion is. So yes, so make them good now and then forget about it. It's a one-off job. Do it now, forget about it. And even in 6 months' time, you'll still be secure, unless somebody in the company makes a mistake, which is why you have to keep reminding people. It's just ongoing training, really.
Thanks very much. I've got a question specifically for Alex Gale, which is, have you seen many occupiers who had previously agreed terms to take warehouse space pull out of the deal as a result of COVID-19? Which was from Sam Valley at CBRE. And just before you answer that one, I'm just going to put a little plea out for the poll, which is running at the moment. We're running this every week in order to find out how confident businesses are feeling about survival. So anybody that hasn't already polled, get your answer in. Okay, Alex, over to you.
Okay, so just looking at the warehouse sector at the moment, we are running, so Croydon itself is at a relatively, pretty low 5% vacancy level. It's not the historical low, but pretty close to the low. So we haven't got a massive oversupply of warehouse space at the moment. In terms of smaller deals, smaller transactions, which are in lawyers' hands, we have seen quite a few of those either being postponed or delayed completely. And I suspect that the majority of that is down to everyone not having certainty in the future and not being able to know when all of this is going to end. On the other side of things, some of the larger warehousing, we've seen an uptick in transactions and demand, particularly from online retailers or those people who are physically involved in the COVID-19 fight, basically. So won't go into details on that, but there are some upsides as well as downsides. That I think this has probably impacted the smaller businesses more than the larger businesses at the moment.
Thank you very much. Catherine, you've got your hand raised. What would you like to say?
I'd like to invite Matt Sims into the conversation. Matt Sims, who is Chief Executive of Croydon Town Centre BID. We had some questions earlier, Matt, I don't know whether you were on the call then, about security, in particularly around sort of the retail sector with boarded up shops, and whether boarding up shops actually encourages antisocial behaviour. I'm wondering what the sort of BID's view is on how retailers in the town centre should be dealing, and generally about the safety of the town centre at this current time. Matthew.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Hurrah! Thanks, Catherine. No, we've had some conversations with the Met Police, and John and the guys will know this. Will know this anyway. The business, the police business is unchanged. They are dealing with other aspects within the town centre, but in terms of antisocial behaviour, the levels aren't actually that high. They have a little frequency in terms of shoplifting and other bits and pieces, but not a great deal. In terms of the advice that the police have given, and this is more to the shops within the retail sector, but also a more generality, is that to remove all of your valuable items from window displays and to put them away so that they're not on show or visible to anybody. To make sure that your alarm systems are checked and fully working and functioning. And really, if you have a concern with your business, and say, for example, you are a jeweler and you want your business to be patrolled, put it that way, then you can contact the BID company. We can speak with the Met Police, and we can ask them to include your business into their regular patrols. But at the moment, as things stand, the crime levels in the town centre are certainly far reduced than what they were due to the social distancing.
Thanks, Matt. And I think it's probably worth saying that this obviously, and I know you are looking after the town centre, but currently in the current climate, obviously everyone is working together. We have a big borough with a number of town centres, and there will be issues in those town centres, particularly some of the more traditional high streets. Are you saying that there isn't a sort of firm advice about boarding up or not boarding up? Is that down to the individual?
No, there's no firm advice about boarding up, and we have seen it in the town centre, more so related towards the nighttime economy, where they're boarding up their premises. Again, speaking with Chief Inspector Knight at the beginning of the week, he hasn't said not to do it. He said it adds a slight benefit for the business. But again, if you take very basic precautions with your business by removing the valuables from site, yes, you can board up if you want to. Again, that makes it as tight as houses. But again, Neil and John will be able to provide even further advice in terms of what you can do on the street. I think my only comment would say, in terms of Croydon BID, we are working with the Met Police. We are regularly in touch to see what the levels of patrols are like, the visibility levels, and the issues that they're dealing with. And we are actively looking at providing a security presence in the town centre over a short period of time to provide support to the police. But we will only do that if the police request it.
Great, thanks, Matt. Back to you, Jo.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I've got a question here which is specifically for John, actually, which is, as a field-based company, we have a proportion of our van fleet parked up at our offices in a serviced office block. How is it best to secure the fleet during the shutdown?
So it's very similar to vacant properties, really. So it's a matter of obviously making sure that the vehicles are all locked, make sure the keys are all in one place. So take them home, keep them secure. You can even sort of like split them amongst your employees if need be, so that they're not all in one location, which will keep it. So that will limit the theft of the keys. But it's a matter of just regularly visiting and keeping an eye on the vehicles. So once or twice a week, just popping by, just check the vehicles, check the doors are locked, check the windows are all secure. Other than actually, unless there's sort of like CCTV or something like that where they are secured, or if they're in the serviced offices, then they may well have CCTV there keeping an eye on the car parks. So you can obviously liaise with the security for the office building if they have manned guarding there. If not, then and you are extremely worried, then you can speak to security companies such as ours, or there's plenty of them around at the moment that are offering mobile patrols. So they will send their guards round in vehicles just to sort of like check, and they will stop off, spend 10-15 minutes in the area, just walking around checking all the vehicles and the like for you.
Thanks very much, John. I have a Ray Woolley from Energized Bikes, who's definitely keen to ask a question of our panel. Ray, I've let you speak, so if you would like to like to ask your question, we would be delighted to hear from you. Are you still with us?
Unmute now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All right, smashing. Sorry, it's Ray Wookie, yes, and it's Energize e-bikes. We sell e-bikes in both Coulsdon and also Tunbridge Wells. And my question, basically, it's a sort of two-headed question. One is that in our Tunbridge Wells store, we've got a landlord who's quite a hard man, who incidentally is a lawyer, and he has indicated to us that initially we thought that we would get a rent reduction of 50%, which is what I proposed to him for this coming quarter, but he took it that it was a rent deferment. And one of the reasons why he said that he couldn't reduce the rent for the period by 50% was because we would be in breach of our lease in some way. Would this be right? Is it just a straight commercial discussion that could take place, or does it put a cart and horse through the lease? And the second question that I've got is well, we'll come back onto that. I'm sorry. Yes, can somebody answer that for me? Oh, yes. The second question is, I think that Alex said at one point that it was possible to dredge back for rates insofar as we have small business rate relief. And also, I understand that we qualify for, as our rateable value is over £15,000, we qualify for the small business grant. But are we able to retrospectively claim back any historic rates? Is that what you indicated earlier, Alex?
Yes, I can answer the second question. I'll leave it. I'll Guy to answer the first question. But as I understand that you can retrospectively look at the rates for the year 2019-20, and you can for retail in particular, there's potentially a third off rate. So well worth looking into. I can put you in touch with our rates expert if you drop me an email, and I can get the two of you talking.
Okay,
thanks very much. Do we have anybody who wants to take on the lease question?
Yes, Ray. As with all lawyers, your landlord is absolutely right in what he says, but he doesn't say the final paragraph. The rent is still due because nothing in any of the legislation has said it's not. Some of the ways that the landlord could use if he wants to enforce his rights to have that rent are not available to him at the moment, but the money is still due and it's therefore a commercial discussion only. But the final, so to that extent, your landlord's right. The final paragraph he hasn't said is that the parties are always free to agree a variation to it if that makes sense. And here you have, we all have, a situation where we don't know what the future is going to hold. And pray God it doesn't come to this, but you are his income out of that property. He doesn't necessarily want to jeopardize that in the long term. So that's sort of one of the conversations to be had. If the premises aren't that good and there's a rent review coming up, then that's going to make the long-term payment of what would be due less good for him. So yes, he can insist on what the lease says, but he doesn't have to. He is entitled, you are both entitled to agree to change its terms. And this is what we're seeing. This is the basis on which all of these discussions are being had. You can have that conversation. You don't have to stick to what the lease says just because it's in the lease if you mutually don't want to.
Yes, because I don't want to just kick the can down the road and have a liability that's going forward when clearly our sales, incidentally, electric bike sales are actually, I won't say reasonable, they are massively hit, but at the same stage, they're not as massively hit as other people because we are a bike shop and we're eligible to stay open. So we're open on restricted hours. But certainly we're not doing the sort of business that we should be seeing at this time in the spring with bikes. But we are just ticking over. But it's still not enough to pay rental going forward to the same sort of rates and cover all our overheads.
Well, the lease says that you're still liable for that, but that might have other consequences which might make your landlord want to reconsider whether he just says, okay, fair enough, let's renegotiate. Things like, is there a break clause in the lease which you are entitled to exercise at some stage in the nearish future, which you might not have wanted to exercise if you'd had a good relationship with the landlord, if he'd have been accommodating when you needed it most. That kind of consideration. When your lease comes to an end, unless you've excluded it from the statutory protection, you've got a right to stay there. That gives him his long-term income security. But if he's going to be like this, you may decide, actually, we don't want to stay there. We don't want to have you as a landlord. We'll look for somewhere else. So there are all of those wider considerations that you can put back to the landlord and say, do you really want just to stand on ceremony here?
Thanks very much, Guy, and thank you to Ray. That has just reminded me that we've had about 40% of you vote in our poll so far, and currently you are all looking confident that there will be a route out of this and some economic recovery in the future. If any of you haven't voted, I'd be really grateful if you did before we get to the end of our session. We are approaching the end of the session now, and I'd just like to quickly go around each of our panelists to say if they've just got one sentence of advice that they would like to leave our attendees with today. Can I start with Neil?
Thank you. So the one word of advice, strong passwords, that's the key. If you have strong passwords, then everything else should fall into place behind it, but keep reiterating it. That was 2 words, sorry.
Thank you very much, Neil. John?
It's very difficult to do it in one word, but it's just secure your properties, visit them regularly if you can, just make sure alarms are on, make sure doors and windows are locked. Thanks
very much. Alex, coming to you.
Well, I've got 2 actually. Talk to your landlord and look at your rates.
Nice and concise. Thank you. Ness?
Very similar to Alex. Talk to your landlords, but first read your lease really carefully.
Thanks very much. And Guy?
Follow on from both of those, communicate, which is the last 2 comments, and the point I've just made to Ray, you are allowed to negotiate different, even though the lease says one thing, you are allowed by mutual consent to agree something different, either temporary or permanent. That's perfectly permissible.
Thanks very much. I have one extra person who would like to come in and give us a top tip. Matt Sims.
I wouldn't say it was a top tip, Joe. What I wanted to do was just to kind of finish that a lot of the businesses we're talking to are concerned about public disorder, the length of the lockdown, and how that might affect businesses going forward in the future. The police at this point in time don't necessarily believe that will be an issue of sorts, but just as a level of reassurance to a lot of the businesses, that the police, as they would normally do in any situation, the same with any right-minded operation, are planning for any type of disturbance so that they can deal with that effectively within the town centre and cities up and down the UK.
Thanks very much, Matt. Well, thank you very much for joining us, everyone, and thanks to our panellists. We are just on time, so I'm going to pass back to Catherine to finish and talk about our webinar for next week.
Yes, thanks very much, Joe. Thank you to everybody for watching, taking part. I'm confident that all of our panellists are happy to share their information. So we will circulate that. And then if you've got questions that you want to put to them directly, I'm sure they would be happy to help with some further advice. And we'll also circulate those website details that we've already given out and those email addresses that you can get further information. What I want to say to all of our attendees this morning is that we want to hear from you about what the issues are that you're facing and what other subjects and other advice that you want to hear via these webinar sessions. We do have a forward plan, but equally this is an ongoing moving situation. And if there is something that is affecting your business that you need some answers on, then please do email us. I think the best email to use, Joe, would be info@wlcreative.org.uk. That will help us to determine what the needs are for future webinars. Next week, we're going to be tackling the subject of health and well-being, a subject that was top of many businesses' lists even before we had COVID-19 to deal with. But clearly now, with many workers working from home, or everybody virtually working from home, and then the issues of furloughed staff, how do you as an employer make sure that the health and well-being element of your business is being looked after? So we are putting together a panel of experts. If anybody out there has some insightful advice and help on that, then please do contact us. Thank you all again for taking part this morning. Stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you.